So good evening and welcome to the monthly ZWAC show. ZWAC stands for the Zero Committee of the Northern California Recycling Association. I am your host, John Moore. Each month on the second Tuesday, we feature something both old and new. Usually the old is inspiring stories of pioneering recyclers from the recycling archives. The new is always something new and interesting, advancing the cause of zero waste. Tonight, I will be interviewing two board members, Tina Baumgartner and Kathy Bonte of the Sunnyvale-based FabMo, F-A-B-M-O. FabMo specializes in the recovery of textiles or clothing. And if you're from a large family, you may never have worried about fashion because your clothing choice had always been determined in advance by your older siblings and cousins in what would later become your hand-me-downs. FabMo takes this fashion circularity into a new dimension. And in fact, some of our recycling became motivated to recycle by the same thing. And of course, reuse is always good. It's always, in the higher end of the for our hierarchy. Tonight, we'll hear some of the stories of their motivations to migrate to recycling. And for that, I will start with the Executive Director of the Recycling Archives, Susan Kinsella. Susan?
Thank you. Well, for the past few years, I've conducted a lot of our recycling archives interviews, and in order to give some consistency and touchstones between those interviews, we work with a list of 22 wide-ranging questions. And not all the questions are pertinent for every interview, and I personally often embroider around the questions and follow in whatever direction that person's stories may go. But then at the end, I circle back to pick up any questions we might have missed that might still be relevant. But there is one question that launches almost every interview, and that is, when and how did you first become aware of recycling as a distinct idea? The answers to this question almost always give meaningful insights into the person being interviewed. Sometimes those answers are completely straightforward, but other times, often they give endearing visions into their background with sometimes quick, quirky, and frequently wonderfully charming stories. So to talk about this topic tonight, I went back through many of our interviews and saw that the answers mostly break down into three categories: school, work, or childhood. Those who answered how they first became aware of recycling with stories about school or their first jobs were usually responding to the actual word recycling. I mean, believe it or not, that didn't actually become part of our common language until around 1970. So, for example, Amy Perlmutter describes how her search for meaning in college ended up creating her career in recycling. As she tells it, I started getting involved in environmental issues in college. I'd gone to college without any clear direction of what I was going to study, and I was changing majors all the time. So I took an anthropology class on systems theory. The main reading for that class was Gregory Bateson's Steps to an Ecology of Mind. Wow, that book changed my life. And what I got out of this systems thinking class was not that I'm not interested in anything, it's that I'm interested in everything. Everything is connected to everything. That was like a revelation to me. Meanwhile, I was also taking a class on the physics of energy. The professor picked me to do some independent research into alternative energy sources, focusing on waste to energy. So I started looking for the garbage generation numbers at the local landfill. And amazingly, this was in 1979, I found that the County Council of Governments there in North Carolina had done a composition analysis of what was going to the landfill, which was almost unheard of at the time. So I looked at that composition analysis, and I found that it broke out the discarded materials by categories, and it told me how much the county was paying to waste them. But then I asked, well, what if they were collected separately instead of being mixed up? I calculated what the market value was for the materials that had recycling markets, and I found that the town was paying $30,000 a year to bury materials valued at $500,000. When I presented my findings to the County Energy Commission, they said to me, even though I was a college student, could you see if you could develop a recycling program here? Well, eventually, Amy became director of solid waste for a county in New Jersey, and then was hired by the city of San Francisco to develop their recycling program. which became one of the foundations for San Francisco's success even today. After several years, she went back to Massachusetts and began helping businesses develop markets for the types of scrap they'd left over from their production processes instead of dumping them. Now, some of the people I've interviewed have not really been conscious of recycling until they fell into work that made them focus on it. Kathy Evans said she didn't even know what recycling was until she fell backwards into it. As she tells it, I don't know, it seems like Earth Day is a hole in my memory. I mean, perhaps it's really in there somewhere, but I don't think so. I think I just missed it. I got connected to recycling because my boyfriend at the time needed a place to do his conscientious objector service instead of being drafted into fighting the Vietnam War, and he had found it at work at the Ecology Center in Berkeley. The Ecology Center started up in 1969, actually, but the directors incorporated it officially on the first Earth Day in 1970. I came into it in 1971. At that time, the Ecology Center was mainly staffed by people who, like my boyfriend, were performing their conscientious objector service obligation. I was hanging around there a lot because of that. And eventually, they needed a bookstore manager. So I became the bookstore manager, which at first was an unpaid position. Not long after that, I got onto the board of directors by write-in. It was such a newly formed membership organization that you could do things like that. That's how it all began. And soon, Kathy was running the Ecology Center's curbside recycling program and designing collection trucks and having them built to her specifications. She saved nonprofit recycling in Berkeley when the city staff tried to do an end run around it by sneaking into the program's property at night and sabotaging their equipment. Kathy saved the day by repairing the equipment in record time, fast enough to be able to report the next day over the phone to a hearing in Sacramento that their equipment was indeed still running, so they could not be shut down. Now, DeLynn Keys got her first job with a recycling consulting firm in Portland, Oregon, and she explains, I'd been volunteering on a local state representative's campaign. She knew Jerry Powell, who wanted to start his own recycling consulting firm. He needed someone who was proficient in research, analysis, and statistics. I had just graduated from college in sociology, where I learned to do all those things, and I got hired. So I was the first employee of his new consulting business. The reason they needed someone with research and analysis skills was that their first paying project was the Oregon Industrial Waste Exchange. That was a program where we would be working with manufacturers to match up a company that was getting rid of a recyclable commodity with a business or a manufacturer that could use it. So it was basically learning about what different businesses in Oregon were making and using, and then finding ways to connect them to people who could use the leftover stuff they were discarding. We did that by creating what we called the database. At one point, that was me sitting on the floor sorting index cards, trying to find matchups in our little office. We didn't have computers then, we only had typewriters. Well, from that start, DeLynn advanced through more recycling jobs until she was asked to write legislation to establish Oregon's first recycling program. She not only did that, but she also was able to get it passed unanimously in Oregon's legislature. But I have to say that the answers to this question of when did you first become aware of recycling that usually most charm me are when people talk about their childhoods. In those cases, they're usually going back before people used the word recycling to describe what they were doing, so their stories focus more on the concept of it than on the actual word. Of course, long before we had specific words for it, people have valued appreciating, conserving, and reusing environmental resources. Like Jay Wexler's story. His childhood might go further back than most of the others we've interviewed so far. As he tells it, we used coal to heat the house where I lived as a boy on Stevens Street in Philadelphia. There were 10 or 12 steps going down to the curb from our house. Since our furnace burned coal, it produced ash. The ash was scooped out of the bottom of the furnace and put into barrels. On trash day, we would take the barrels down to the curb for the trashmen to collect. When I was 4 years old, I started helping. I would peruse that area and I saw that there were black pieces of coal that had missed combustion. So I collected those in a bucket and took them back inside. There they were reused because we put them back into the furnace. Also, to help the World War II war effort, our elementary school organized scrap metal collection. We would empty tin cans and then cut the ends. And next, we'd flatten the can with the ends inside, and then we would dump them into the scrap metal bin. When I'd go over to the school with our medals and drop them off, I would find pretty good stuff that I could use, like cap guns. That's where I got my first flavor of salvage. Jay ended up making a career out of metal salvaging and trading. He would learn about government auctions or business scrap that were opportunities just waiting to happen for anyone savvy enough to know how to connect those materials to customers who could reuse or recycle them in one way or another. He bought all kinds of unexpected things like jet engines and the tracks on army tanks, as well as loads of metals and other cast-offs, and then made brilliant deals to pass them on to businesses that could use them. Now, in her answer to this question, Brenda Platt tells about how her family moved all around the world during her childhood. She said, I was 5 weeks old when my parents moved to Liberia, West Africa. My dad worked for an international bank that lent to developing countries. As a young child of 6 through 8 years of age, we lived in Iran. And after that, I was in England for a year. But then we lived in Trinidad and Tobago. I was in Port of Spain for 5 years, and then my parents went back to Liberia. I got to see firsthand not only poverty, but also real culture and communities. For example, when I think of Iranians, I remember all the artisans and all the things they were making. There was great copper work and carpets and the breads and the peaches. There was a real community and real culture and real arts. There wasn't a lot of packaging and consumerism. Whenever I would come to the States as a kid, which we did every summer, it was culture shock. I think my first awareness of recycling was actually more about reuse, because so much of what we bought in those countries was packed in refillable containers. When we would buy a case of soda pop, it was always in glass refillable containers. I remember being so surprised when we came to the States that we just didn't do that with our bottles here. Instead, we just threw those containers away. I think that reuse was my first exposure to material conservation as a kid. In the third world, they don't let so much go to waste. Brenda eventually got an engineering degree and started working for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in Washington, D.C. Now she's one of the foremost experts in the U.S. on reuse and composting issues. Now, Jan Michael Hulse was deeply influenced by his family's history as migrants from the Dust Bowl. He said, I guess you could say that my dad was an original climate refugee. His stories still stick with me today about how the Dust Bowl in the Midwest USA happened. A long drought occurred, the farmland dried up, and the red soil blew away in horrendous dust storms. He would tell me all about how he came to California in a caravan of migrants and got placed in an internment camp. His only escape was joining up with the military. What I remember most about his chats was him telling me about the Dust Bowl and the importance of soil and conservation. Coupled with time I spent on the revitalized family farm in Oklahoma, I learned a waste not, want not pioneering ethic, where wasting was not a thing of beauty, and this ethic was my foundation for who I am today. Michael Hulse developed a consulting career that included writing a huge report for the World Bank on why their rigid ideas about landfills and sanitation were squeezing out scavengers in countries around the world who were competing for resources that could be reused or recycled instead of trashed. And to complete this discussion, I want to tell you about my own childhood experience that connects reuse and recycling directly to tonight's featured presentation. When I think back on when I first became aware of the concept of recycling, I remember this huge box that used to appear at my family's house 2 or 3 times a year. This box was the size that you'd use to deliver a big washing machine in, or at least that's how I remember it. I mean, of course, I was much smaller then. And that huge box was filled with clothes. So each time that box arrived, we'd go through it to pull out all the clothes that might fit 1 or more of the 8 kids in my family. And then my mother would refill it with the clothes that we'd outgrown, and the box would disappear until coming back to us many months later, usually in one of the aunts' or uncle's cars. I didn't understand what was happening then, but now I realize that my mother had set up a system with the women of her brothers and sisters' families. She and they had all grown up in the 1930s during the Depression, and there was very little money in their household. So they had to develop many creative strategies to stay afloat, and one of them was to share clothes. 20 or 30 years later, when they started having their own kids, they were still using those strategies, so they shared all their kids' clothes. I had something like 30 siblings and cousins on that side of the family, and we all wore each other's clothes. Earlier today, in fact, I talked with my mother, who's soon turning 97, and she said that's how all the mothers in the family got their maternity clothes as well. They all sent them around in that box. But I myself didn't get a lot out of the clothes box because I was one of the oldest girl cousins. So there was little to pass down to me. So instead, my mother, who was a skilled seamstress in addition to her training as a nurse, also made a lot of our clothes. And then when I was around 10 or so, my mother started teaching me how to use patterns and cut fabrics to make clothes. And from then on, I made almost all my own clothes all the way through college. So I've always loved the delight of different fabrics and imagining what they might be made into. And I understand that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
That's a great segue. That's a great story, Susan. I'm sorry you didn't get more fashion choices.
It didn't matter to me.
So I think we have with us, and I'm only unclear because the names aren't in the box, but I think we have Kathy Bonte and Tina Baumgartner. Are you both here?
Yeah, hi.
Great, hi. Thanks for joining us so much. You are board members of the company called FabMo, which we want to talk to you about. What does FabMo do?
So let me first say hi. I'm Tina. Kathy is the other one with XYZ.
Right.
ZYZ. My name is Tina Baumgartner, and I just rolled off the board. FabMo, Kathy is our current board chair, and FabMo is indeed not a company. It is a not-for-profit organization. And what we do on a high level, and I just give a little bit of an overview, and then I'm going to throw it over to Kathy because she's our board chair, so she's the person in the know. What we do is collect materials from the San Francisco design centers, as well as from other individuals, fabrics, but also tiles and wallpapers and paper in general, notions, and then collect those, sort them, and make them available to basically the creative community in our neck of the woods. We are located in Sunnyvale. We have people coming all the way from Gilroy all the way up to San Ramon or Berkeley to come to us to help out, but also to shop. We are a not-for-profit, as I mentioned, and we are a complete volunteer organization. So Kathy can give you a little bit more of an overview of how we got started. And
sure, I would love to tell the story. It's a great story.
It is, yeah.
About sometime over 2 decades ago, our founders, Hannah and Jonathan Cranch, were at the Design Center in San Francisco. I don't know how many of you have ever been there, but it's a couple of buildings filled with all sorts of interior design businesses. And they were there because Jonathan was doing a general contractor job and he wanted to look at the latest trends. And Hannah was a teacher at the time. And while they were there, they saw some bags being tossed out the back door of one of the showrooms. And one of the bags ripped open and some beautiful fabrics and some other materials fell out. And Hannah was asked, is that being thrown away? And they said, yeah, we just have all these overruns and samples and swatches and, it's going in the trash. And she said, can I take a bag or two back to Palo Alto and share it with some of my teacher friends and my neighbors? And they said, sure, because they were going to throw it out anyway. So she took it back to Palo Alto, dumped it out in her living room, had a couple friends come over. And that was basically how FabMo was born. People went crazy for the stuff. And she started making regular trips there. I don't know exactly how many trips she made initially, but she started going back and taking more things. And then, they started to outgrow their living room. They started to do little distributions in their garage, a true Silicon Valley startup. And then eventually they moved into more commercial space. And in 2009, they became a certified nonprofit. And now this is our third location, and we're in Sunnyvale in this lovely warehouse with, I mean, I would say a lot of space, but we're quickly outgrowing it, right, Tina? We could always
Oh,
use
yeah.
more space, but it's quite a step up from where we were before.
So
And we have people, we're open twice a month to the public for usually 3 days a week, and people come in and shop and get materials and get inspired.
so the warehouse is sort of both a collection point and a retail outlet?
Yes, yes. The
Yeah.
back room is, I mean, it's kind of a warehousey commercial area that we're in, but the back area is where we store things, and then the front couple of rooms are the presentation area, and we have tables and racks and shelves and all sorts of ways to display our materials, and people come in
The
and
way you
shop.
have to imagine that is that we get the materials generally in trash bags or sometimes in boxes. And so two people go to San Francisco once a week. I would say about 50 times a year, maybe 48, but almost every Monday, somebody goes up, picks up these things and brings them back to FabMo. The truck gets unloaded, and then we have our volunteers sort the materials. And we get everything from tiny little, like carded samples with a swatch of fabric yay big to what we call our wings, which are 2.5 yards, some of various widths. And so they get sorted, some get priced, some go into our treasures room, priceless treasures room, which is for people just to pick up and leave a donation. And all of that is going on in the warehouse.
We also, in addition to the sorting times, which Tina mentioned, we also have special sections that are measuring and pricing. And those are, you know, literally like the volunteers are measuring out the fabric, making little notes about how large it is and putting a tag on it and a price. And because we're starting to get materials, not just from the design center, but also from private donations, a quilting shop that's closing, a home quilter that has a big stash. So all that material also needs to be sorted through and measured and examined, make sure it's suitable to put out for sale or even to give away. We don't want to have anything that's, moldy or things like that. So
What percentage of your inventory is finished goods, like the quilt you were talking about, as opposed to materials that you could make something from?
So
sorry, go ahead, Tina.
The majority is material to make something out of it. For example, we do not accept clothing. We actually do not want to have finished goods. The idea is that we have materials and people pick it up and have their own creative inspiration and do something with it. That doesn't mean that never a piece of clothing or a sheet or something sneaks into a donation. So we get those as well. But it's a small minority, and we're trying to keep that to a minimum by telling people, don't bring us clothing, don't bring us bedding, don't bring us that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do sometimes get what we call UFOs, unfinished objects, like somebody who started a quilt or started something, and then they bring that in, and then people can choose to continue it or take it apart or take it in a whole different direction, turned it into an art piece. So we get a lot of that. And to Tina's point about not selling fully made artisan goods, we do have an event once a year, which we finally brought back after COVID shut us down. And that's an artisans market where we do reach out to all the people who make things with FabMo material, and they have an opportunity to sell their finished products there. But that's a separate once a year event.
When is that?
We don't have a date for this year, but it will most likely be in October again. It was in October last year. And
yeah, it's generally at the very early edge of the holiday season. We like to be first before all the churches and everybody else jumps in.
We're trailblazers.
So Tina, I think you mentioned that your target market, if you will, are creative communities. So like if I had an acting troupe and I needed to have costumes, I would come to see you and what you've got. Is that what you?
Yeah. And it's the there's no limitation. We have a lot of teachers come pick up
Mhm.
materials for their classes. We also, with a grant from the county, have developed classroom kits. So there's 4 different ones inspired by an artist each. Sorry if I sound a little crazy. I have a really bad cold, so my head is not working as it should be. So we have those 4 kits. The materials are being provided by FabMo, and teachers can contact us, say, I'd like this kit for like my 3rd grade class, and we'll get those ready for them. But whatever designer you are, or artist, or just a crafter, you want to, do some little projects, you can come and pick it up.
So if I have a community theater, or if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, can I get stuff from you for free?
In general, we do not. So we have the priceless treasure room. The other things the teachers we give materials to for free. The other things we sell, and the reason we sell is because we have our facility to pay for, and all of you can certainly imagine that having a facility with a big warehouse in Silicon Valley is not coming cheap. So pretty much everything we make is just supporting our operations, and just, keep the lights on and the doors open.
Well, why did the founders, or you, if it was you, choose the nonprofit mode as opposed to a for-profit mode?
I think they really wanted to give back and do something good
Yeah.
for the community. They were really in this for the most altruistic of reasons. I wasn't involved with FabMo at the time, so I'm not exactly sure exactly how the discussion went, but I know that they're very generous in giving people, and I have a feeling they didn't feel right about making any money on this. They just wanted to do something good.
Yeah, and I mean,
Here you are,
Jonathan.
Sunnyvale, you got to make some money to support.
Well, we are.
Yeah.
We are keeping our head above water, but we're not looking to make a profit. We're just looking to cover our expenses and keep expanding. But we're doing okay.
Well, you don't want to
we
make
made
a
it
loss
to
either,
public.
right? I mean, fundamentally, it's all just math. If you make more money than you actually spend, then you have a profit, and you can do anything you want with the profit, good, bad, evil, whatever. But that's basically the model you have. It seems to me you are a business in that way.
I wasn't trying to suggest otherwise. I was just wondering if it was why the choice was made.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
we have.
interesting.
Go ahead, Tina. Sorry.
Sorry, I think Kathy is spot on. The founders were really driven by that desire to give back to the community, and Jonathan has passed on since, but Hannah is, I want to say, Kathy, she's pushing 80, and she basically
She is 80.
She is 80. Okay.
Yeah.
She's basically putting in 8-hour days, 5 days a week, and never taken a dollar for it. So there's a lot of just passion about helping out the community, and also, I mean, and that's kind of the really important aspect for us as well. It's not just helping the community, but also the sustainability aspect of it all. The idea that hopefully people come to us and don't buy new, and come to us and make things from these materials that replace stuff that they would otherwise buy. I brought an example. I use little curtain remnants to make veggie bags out of. So put my onions and my potatoes or something in when I go shopping, rather than using a plastic bag, and which makes me probably the only person in the world who has a Calvin Klein onion bag. I couldn't help putting that little label there. So these are some of the things we encourage our patrons to think about. And to me, coming to FabMo is a bit of a gateway drug, because then you start thinking about waste and how wasteful our lives otherwise are. And you naturally start thinking about to reuse and how to use small pieces of fabric and how to translate this into other areas of your life.
Do you make any calculations of how much stuff you get out of landfill? It sounds like you get a lot of garbage bag stuff, which
So
might
we,
have,
sorry, so we have an estimate of about 70 tons a year, but
Mhm.
that's based on, you know, weighing a couple of loads, what we would consider average loads, and then multiplying that by the 24 pickups a year. But I have a feeling, and Tina and I were talking about this before the Zoom yesterday, that it's probably gotten bigger since we last calculated it, because now we're getting more private donations, and it just seems like there's a lot of stuff coming in. So it's, but 70 tons is kind of what we've been saying, safe estimate.
right, and of course, the more stuff you take in, the more you have to do to process it. And
Yes,
Right.
so
absolutely.
with that in mind, what do you have a future plan to increase your outreach to collect stuff?
Well, right now we're looking to more move the stuff out that we have, not to get more stuff in, because we're kind of filled to the rafters in the warehouse right now. We had a lot of big donations come in, but right now we're looking to get more volunteers to process the stuff that we already have. COVID hit us hard as far as volunteers, and we're getting back gradually, but we need to reach out to the next generation of volunteers.
Yeah, I
Some
was
young
wondering
people.
how you recruit your volunteers. What kind of, how do you do they just walk in the door and say, I'm interested and I'd like to work here?
I wish.
Occasionally happens, very
Yeah.
occasionally.
So, but then, okay, if that doesn't happen, then how does it work? Well, how do you recruit?
Well, a lot of them start out like I did as customers, or we used to
too.
call them guests, because we weren't selling anything at that time, and so we didn't want to call them customers because that implied, you know, that we were a store. But they start out coming there to get materials, and then they get passionate about the organization, and then they realize we need help, and then they wind up becoming volunteers that way. But we do also recruit. We have been recruiting to high schools and to the National Charity League, which is a organization for mothers and daughters high school age, and they do a lot of community service things. We recruit at Earth Day events and all sorts of other community events. Whenever we can get out there, we are trying to get out there, and also, you know, social media.
Yeah,
It seems to me that churches might be a place to go for volunteers. You might have a handout or something that you give out and, you know, say volunteer now, you know, it makes you feel good. It's something
Yeah.
spiritual you can do.
yeah,
you know.
that's a good idea. I don't
That
think
is
we
a
have
very good
gone
idea.
after churches in any sort of systematic fashion.
Yeah,
I
not
mean,
churches, but also synagogues and
Of
and
course.
just
temples and all
houses of
that.
worship. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So just so everybody knows, I'm going to reserve time at the end so anybody can ask questions of Kathy and Tina. I wanted to ask Tina something. You both talked about the need to get stuff out more than bring stuff in. And Tina, you were talking about how you make these little onion bags. I'm wondering, are you in contact with any potential end users to take in bulk some of the materials you get in? Like someone who wanted to, you know, make onion bags for a living?
Again, I think the answer is not in any systematic way. We have people that we know take larger amounts. And we have at one point done some research into places where we can offload some of the stuff that we really have a hard time using. If you imagine you get, I don't know, 35 8-inch square beige polyester squares, there is not all that much you can do, or anybody can do with that. So we're looking for places to offload those. And it is unfortunately extremely difficult, bordering on the impossible. They're often carded, so they have to, you know, there's the paper on it and then the fabric. So there is the question of how to deal with this stuff. that really nobody wants. And unfortunately, there's quite a bit of that as well.
What happens?
I'm not sure that answers your question, but
What happens in the end to the stuff nobody wants that you have?
we sneak it into savers, right?
Savers takes fabric for recycling. But we haven't been able to quite pin them down on exactly what they do with it. So we're we're not 100% convinced all of it gets recycled, but if it was going to go in the trash anyway, and we give it to savers and they can do something with even 10, 20, 30% of it, that's still better. We just can't take everything. But going back to your question, John, about reaching out to organizations or people that can take large amounts, we do sometimes market to, you mentioned theater groups before. So we reach out to some of those organizations. And also there are some other nonprofits that regularly come to us to get materials. So they tend to take larger amounts. And then all of the makers and artisans, some of them do it on quite a larger scale, and others are just, making a few things here and there. But
and as a nonprofit, you give tax deductions for the donations that you receive?
Yes.
When somebody donates money to us or materials, yes, they get a receipt.
They can ask for a receipt, and then they get one.
Do you make any grants as a nonprofit?
Make any grants? No, we haven't explored that yet. We only received our first grant recently. So
I heard a line once from Dan Knapp, and it seems like it might apply, which is a big enough pile of anything is worth something. So one question I always like to ask is, have you encountered any regulatory barriers to what you're trying to accomplish?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Tina, do you?
No, I don't think there is any regulatory issues involved. I mean, the only thing we sometimes discuss, and I don't think it's a regulatory thing, is we're basically relieving San Francisco of trash, what would be in their trash, and bringing it to Santa Clara County. And somehow we always feel that San Francisco should pay us for that.
Right. But they're paying Recology for it, and doesn't Recology get you mad that you're taking their stuff?
We certainly haven't heard anything to that effect.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. So my last question, I think, is where did the name FabMo come from, and what does it stand for?
Fabric and more.
Fabric more?
Fabric and more.
And more. Okay.
Because it's tile,
We
wood.
have a lot of fabric, but we have other things. We have quite a bit of wallpaper, which people use for scrapbooking and making little boxes and making cards. Some of that stuff is fantastic. Some is rather dull. We also get tiles from the design center. Some really very fancy tiles sometimes where people make mosaics with. And then all sorts of other stuff, trims, etc., come from the design centers. And from private donations, we literally get everything from pins and needles and zippers and, anything that you can think of, buttons. So that all is the more.
And yarn, did you mention yarn? Lots of yarn.
Oh, no, I didn't mention yarn. I should have mentioned yarn.
I did have one more question, which is if I was interested in a very cool quilt, do you have a website or anything where I can online shop for it?
We don't offer the finished goods on our website. However, there are a lot of people at FabMo who are volunteers who are very talented quilters. So if you were to come in, we could probably there's probably at any given time 2 volunteers at FabMo who are talented quilters. You might be able to commission one from them.
We have unfinished ones. Just now we have a couple of unfinished ones. So if you're interested in finishing one, I can hook you up.
There's almost no chance of me finishing one, but I would probably be interested in buying one or commissioning one.
We do also get finished ones. And to expand on your question a little bit, during COVID, when there was absolutely nothing we could do basically to bring people in, we started an online store. But the online store is pickup only. So it's not a store that you can order and then we ship it. And then that has two reasons. Reason one is the practical one, namely it takes a lot of men, or in our case mostly women power, to ship things. It's also very expensive, so we don't do it. And the other point is that our charter as an organization is really to serve our local community. And if we ship stuff up to Chicago, we don't really fulfill that purpose. And it also adds a lot of, carbon footprint to ship stuff off. We do occasionally, we also sell other stuff on the store, like sometimes we sell finished goods. It's a bit of a supply and demand thing. Since we don't have it very often, people don't look for it. If people don't look for it, we don't upload it. So, but if you are interested in buying fabric and then swinging by FabMo and picking it up, that's certainly an easy way.
Okay.
So a good possibility.
So one of the questions was put in the chat, and I hadn't, it was an issue I hadn't thought of. Question is, if PFAS will eventually come into, wondering if PFAS will eventually come into play as a regulatory barrier, because some fabrics might be treated with water-resistant chemicals. Does that become an issue with you?
It hasn't at this point, no. I mean, sometimes we don't even know what the fiber content is of some of the materials that we get. Sometimes it has a tag, but we're getting it all from the design center, so presumably it passes muster there.
Compliance, yeah.
So the design center has, as I remember it from being there many years ago, has a number of different tenants selling different kinds of items, usually furniture related. Do you have a relationship with everybody in the building?
Not
No.
everybody, but we have several studios or businesses that we make regular pickups from.
I see.
And we have a very good working relationship with all of them. They
So
get
yeah.
gifts from us for
Hannah
Christmas,
knows-
little cards, and
Hannah knows everybody and everybody's dog.
that's Hannah's our founder.
Yeah.
I saw somebody put in the chat suggesting Raft, and Raft is actually an organization. I forgot to mention that earlier, but we do very often bring our excess fabric over to Raft, because Raft doesn't specialize in fabric, but they usually have one or two of their bulk bins dedicated to either the swatch booklets or the actual fabric pieces. Yeah, they are a good resource for us to give things.
What does RAFT stand for? What does that mean?
Resource Area for Teachers,
Oh.
and they're in San Jose.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're also a really cool organization. They take all sorts of stuff that companies don't need anymore and make projects for schools, for teachers out of it. So if you have, I don't know, 8,000 pencils that you don't need, you can bring them there, and all sorts of weird stuff. And they make
Even furniture. They have like a office closes in Silicon Valley or redecorates, which is, and throws out all their furniture. It goes to Raft sometimes.
Well, I know that next time I'm in the Sunnyvale area, you're on my destination list.
okay, let us know before so we can make sure and give you a good tour. Obviously, everybody else, if you want to come and have a look, as Kathy said, we have 2 events every month, 3 days, a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So roughly every other week, where we are open to the public, but we can always, there's often somebody there working behind the scenes. So
and more, we're looking to do sort of private tours for organizations. Like I belong to a group called the Los Altos Art Docents, and they're all creative people that are volunteering in the school district. They're all coming in for a special tour in February. And Silicon Valley Reads is another organization. They're coming in for a special event in early March. And there might be a quilting guild from Morgan Hill that usually meets every Wednesday that has requested a special appointment. So if you want to come, John, if you're in the area, just let us know and we'll make it work.
Thank you. And I want to open it up to questions if anybody has questions of Tina or Kathy. Well,
Can I have a question? Somebody suggested Goodwill or Salvation Army, and I'm actually not sure that we tried them out, but Janine, do you have experience bringing
Yeah.
stuff like, yeah?
So specifically with Goodwill, recently in the last, 6 months to a year, got a chance to have the behind the scenes tour in the South San Francisco main operating area of Goodwill. So we're seeing what that process looks like, understanding the move through. So those fabric scraps aren't necessarily going to be sold to folks, but they will move through their chain of operations to potentially be, say, like, carpet padding, or, stuffed, chopped up to be stuffing for a car seat or something like that, the interior part.
Mhm.
So they have processes abound. Salvation Army, states that they have them, but you don't really necessarily see those online. And I haven't been to one of their like back houses or spoken with one of their folks recently. But Goodwill's even gone so far as to start putting these statements online on their website. And so Goodwill is now not just one small area, or, sort of San Francisco and Southern San Francisco. It's also the East Bay. It's the entire greater counties of them, and they're all working towards the same processing. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we did our research into where to get rid of certain things, one of the major problems was that while we feel we have a lot of stuff for a commercial facility, it's not enough. It's just a small drop. But if Goodwill or Salvation Army, if they collect more, and as you said, from like the whole region, they might reach, or probably reach, that critical level where a commercial company who makes stuffing or whatever they make out of it says, okay, I'll take it. So yeah, we'll look into that.
Definitely.
All consolidated on the back end and all trucked. And then, eventually, right, it is overseas for some of those smaller parts, or internally, but it is very, very large volumes, especially with trying to bridge the sort of the West Bay with the East Bay going forward. But the separating is phenomenal in terms of the amount of people and staff to get that to happen. But that's really why you are all in existence, FabMo, because you're really the first place that these materials should go, right? And keeping them in their original intent, but eventually over time.
Yeah. And we get absolutely amazingly beautiful things sometimes. We get embroidered silk, we get linens and cottons and beautiful things. But as I said, we do get those beige polyester 8-inch squares. And part of our effort, and we probably have to put a little more oomph behind that, is to also educate people, for example, architects. And I did a talk last year at architecture company in San Jose about not using so many. They should just not have 300s of the same little 8-inch square carded sample around and then throw 250 out. So to some extent, we don't want to put ourselves out of business by saying don't do this whole sample thing anymore, but the sustainable way really would be to have less of them in the first place.
I want to follow up on that, because I was thinking the same thing as you were talking about those little polyester squares. Are there things that you don't take for just that reason?
That's a good question. Yeah, from the design center, it's very hard to be selective, because they give us the things that they've already put together in a bag, and we don't have the time when we're making a lot of pickups to go through and say, no, we'll take this, and this, but not that, because we just have a day to make the rounds. But we are getting more selective about private donations, and we try to screen things. If somebody wants to bring in some curtains that are faded by the sun and maybe, their cat scratched up, we really don't want that, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to rehome that. Same thing, fabric that hasn't been stored well, that has, been subject to, pests or mold or other things like that. We really don't want to deal with that. And we don't deal with clothing, as Tina said. So we're
Yes.
trying to get more selective, mainly because we don't have the bandwidth to cycle things through and then wind up not being able to do anything with them.
Speaking
You just used a word I've never heard before, and I thought it was real interesting, and that was the word rehome.
Oh,
Who came up with that one?
I don't think I did, but I mean, I kind of think of us as like an animal shelter for
Right.
fabric, if you will. We don't want to hold on to them too long. We want to get them all good homes. But if somebody brings in, a dog that's blind and has only one leg and is like, 12 years old and has fleas, we're probably not going to be able to rehome him or her too easily. So.
That's where the term comes from, Dan.
Yeah, I think so.
Shelters.
Yeah.
If you're a pet shelter and you adopt out an animal to somebody and they don't like it and they bring it back, then you have to rehome it somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, that must have been where I got it from.
And these are pet
I've always
projects.
been interested in words and how they come to be and how
Uh-huh.
people adapt their language so that they can talk about things that are out there that they're doing and that don't have a word. So that was really interesting, and one of the things I'll carry away from your talk. The last thing I'd like to throw in is that I am in business, and we do think of ourselves as a retail business. The
Mhm.
company I run is Urban Ore in Berkeley, and we sell a lot of different kinds of things, including doors and windows. But then we also have a clothing part of it. Our main mission is to keep things out of the landfill we print on everything that we put out that's printed with our logo to end the age of waste. So we're really all about that. And so clothing is part of what we do, and we have people that sort. We have about 3 people right now, I think, that do sorting and preparation of clothing. And I'd just like to throw in that we just got our profit and loss for 2023. And the clothing sales were $146,000.
Wow.
And that's all
Yeah.
used clothing. It's all used clothing. And we get things that are sometimes sell for hundreds of dollars
Hmm.
because they're so interesting, costumes and bridal stuff, things from weddings.
Oh, sure.
All that kind of thing. And so you need, if you wanted to do that, and generate some cash flow, there's nothing in your charter as a nonprofit that prevents you from making more money. And if
No,
you make more money,
No,
you're
no.
actually moving things, you're moving more things through.
That's not the problem. And let me tell you, I love Urban Ore. I don't get there enough because I'm so far away, namely in the South Bay. But for us, I think the major point is that we just don't have the room. I don't know how big your facility is, but if I remember correctly, it's rather spacious. We
Yes.
have about, Kathy, 5,000 square
I
feet.
think we're less than that. I think it's more like 4.
Mhm.
And that's between the warehouse and our sales area. And so
Well, we started with nothing, and our first year was $150,000, but that was 40 years ago. And now last year we did 3.3 million.
Wow.
yeah, that's real.
So, yeah, there's a lot that you can actually generate quite a lot of cash flow in reuse because it's really the highest and best, that we have that concept of highest and best use.
Hmm.
And generally speaking, reuse is pretty up there, and it's higher than recycle.
Can I
Certainly
ask you,
higher than
Dan,
waste.
did you buy your facility or your facility, or
We did,
how did you?
but we didn't buy it right away. The first year we were out at the landfill with absolutely nothing. I mean, not even, we traded somebody for a trailer that we used as an office, but before that, we didn't have anything at all. So, we could only pay ourselves $4 an hour at that time. Now, our highest paid people making around $50,000 a year. or more, actually. We have quite a few people that make more than 50.
And what kind of roles do they play?
Oh, they are managers a lot. We're
Uh-huh.
manager heavy. We have a manager, for example, that's in our outside trader department, and they just go out in a truck and pick up materials and bring them to us.
Mhm.
Then we have another one who's a manager of salvage and recycling, and they go to the city of Berkeley transfer station and bring back anywhere from 2 to 7 tons a day of materials that we sell. And then there's people that are in charge of building materials. We call that building materials exchange. There's a manager there. There's a whole bunch of assistant managers. There's also specialists who get to be really good at some particular thing or have a passion for it.
Mhm.
They get a bump up in pay. There's a lot of incentive built into our whole pay structure to support honesty in business. I mean, I'm really strong for running an honest business, paying all the taxes, all the things that you have to do as a business. So yeah, any time you come and see us. It's a real interesting place. 7 days a week we're open.
Wow. So you
Uh,
have quite a staff.
We always say, yeah, there's 40,
Yeah.
around 40.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's 39 more than we have, or 39.
No, 39 and 3/4 more than we
Yeah.
have.
We have one
You're-
paid
you're-
driver that we hired last year.
Well, the point I was trying to bring up, though, is that by going to actually finished goods,
Mhm.
you might be able to afford a bigger place eventually.
Mhm.
That's kind of how we did it. I mean, we did end up buying the property, most of the property we sit on now.
Mhm.
And but we didn't do that by getting grants. We did it by selling stuff and moving it through really fast.
So Dan, they were also talking earlier about the need to recruit volunteers. Urbanor doesn't recruit volunteers, do they?
No, we don't. We've never relied on volunteers. It's a whole different thing for us. I don't know. I just never have done that. I've always thought that you should pay people for their work, and that's how we've done it. That's just been a choice that we've made.
So Kathy and Tina, I'll just mention something that happened up here. My son went to in the East Bay,
To where?
And-
I'm sorry.
out in Contra Costa County in the
Okay.
East. And his school, and I understand a lot of schools now are making a big emphasis on juniors and seniors transitioning to adulthood by learning job skills and life skills. And they provided the students at this school with a number of volunteer opportunities. And my son ended up volunteering at the Habitat for Humanity Restore out in East Oakland. And he did it because he kind of had to for school, but he also did it because it was kind of cool. And I wonder if you might be able to recruit from local high schools.
Well, that's what I was saying before. We are actively reaching out to local high schools and the local youth charity organizations and the youth environmental groups as well, because they do have to do community service as part of a lot of times as part of their graduation requirement. And we're hoping to get more of them. We have to amend the hours right now that we use volunteers, because right now a lot of things happen during the daytime when kids are in school, but we're in the process of trying to be more accommodating with some of our shifts, our volunteer shifts, so that we can get younger people in, like weekends or after school kind of thing.
Yeah.
We did have, Kathy, remind me, 1 or 2 years now, a summer intern.
Yes, through the
from-
county. And that the first year that worked out very well. The second year, there was a glitch and it didn't work out quite as well. But we might do it again this summer. Bonnie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Bonnie, you have a question?
Yes, hello. Great presentation today. Tina or Kathy, can you just remind me if y'all spoke about utilizing social media or online as a way to like sell your fabrics, market your fabrics?
We do have a presence on Facebook and Instagram. But I'm not really a social media maven. And like I said, we're all volunteers. We have another board member, a marketing committee member who posts on Instagram, and Tina and I both post on Facebook along with one of our other board members, Braun. But I'm sure that there are a lot more things we could be doing. We've tried to get some of our younger volunteers to also share our posts and post for us because, probably know what they're doing.
I'm thinking about online markets like Poshmark or eBay if the idea is to like utilize some of these online markets too.
We do sell on eBay. We have a store on eBay, and what we sell there is sometimes we get very special fabric. Sometimes we get quilting fabric from very well-known designers. And sometimes we get what we call a weird and wonderful stuff, because just because we say, please don't bring us any porcelain, doesn't mean people don't bring us any porcelain or vases or whatever. So sometimes we end up with stuff that we didn't expect. And sometimes we end up with stuff that's quite, valuable enough. And so we put those on eBay. We also get a lot of patterns and sewing patterns. And some of them, if they are the right sewing pattern from the right designer, can fetch you $50, $60. And so they go on eBay as well. So we utilize that on social. But as I said about the shipping before, it's always a matter of we have to manage it with the people we have. I thought for a while we should add an Etsy store, but I just don't think the organization can handle it at this point. It's just shipping is a lot of work. I've had an Etsy store for a number of years. It's a hell of a lot of work. On social media, as Kathy said, we have Facebook, which is, I think, quite mature. We have a good following. We have active followers, and it speaks to our current group of customers and followers and supporters, which tend to be older and female. So we do Instagram, but it would be awesome if we could find somebody younger who would do TikTok or something that speaks more to the younger maker crowd. So if you're interested, you're hired.
You get all those high school kids, they could do social media while they're taking classes.
Well, I've tried in the past to get them to post for us, and occasionally they have posted a couple times, but I haven't found that teen influencer just yet who's going to make FabMo go viral and get us 2 million hits.
Yeah, and the 18 to 25 year age bracket.
Yeah.
So Bailey Hall was here earlier. She's not here anymore, and she's with the city of Sunnyvale.
Yeah,
and it was through her that we found you. Do you get much?
Oh, okay.
Get much support from the city?
We do. Kathy and I just met with the mayor.
Okay.
He made some introductions. So yeah, the city has been supportive, and I'm glad that you told us that it was Bailey who made the connection. I'll send her an email. She's been to FabMo, right? Yeah,
I think
Kathy?
so. Yeah.
Yeah, she has. I wasn't there, and Larry Klein was at FabMo at least once. He came to our.
And his wife would come too.
Yeah, she would also come. So yeah, that's nice to have that support.
And we're going to be most likely doing the Earth Day celebration that the city is going to be having. We're just right now trying to line up our volunteers to do the tabling and figure out how what project hands-on project we might have if we're going to have one. But
we had also have contributed in the past to the Hands on the Arts event, which is like later in summer. I forget, but I know we did kids during COVID.
That's usually a follow-up question I usually ask. I'm a lawyer, and so I'm used to cleanup kinds of questions. Is there something that's really interesting doing that I've forgotten to ask you about?
Thinking.
Well, I think we covered.
You covered the ground quite well. just to reinforce, if anybody feels inspired now, we'd love to have you come by and recruit you into our organization as a shopper or as a volunteer or both.
If you're a
Or just-
creative person, you will really enjoy visiting FabMo. Trust me, you'll be hooked.
It would have saved me from making a cost, which wasn't easy. Does anybody else have questions of Kathy or Tina before we adjourn?
Well, I was just thinking that it would be really nice to have some photos of your place and some of the kinds of fabrics that you deal with. I bet you get you get lace.
Oh,
Yeah.
you name it. Yeah, we get a lot of lace, a lot of trims, a lot of like cording. We get beads. We get
Beads,
rickrack,
yeah, beads and buttons.
beads and buttons and
Yes.
bows and baubles and
Buttons can be amazing. Buttons can really be incredible. They're jewels. Some-
yeah,
Yeah,
some of
they
them
are.
are.
Yeah. And you know, the good thing is within our community, for many things, we have people who are really passionate about it. Like we have the button lady, and she will look at the button, say, cheap, cheap, cheap. Oh, interesting. Oh, very interesting. So these things also get sorted and looked at by people who just have a passion and know a lot about them. We also do get quite a bit of fashion jewelry, I have to say.
I remember
Wow.
doing a long time ago, I did a little study of some buttons that we got. We got about a cubic foot of buttons, and they were all the same. They were kind of an iridescent dark purple kind of color. And I thought, well, okay, one way to do this would be just to price the whole thing and put it in a bottle and sell it as is. But then I thought, well, maybe these are really valuable. You know, what if we divided it up and put them in little bags and sold them? Man, the amount of money that you can get for it by splitting it up and making it into smaller, you know, it takes a little labor, but the amount of money was something like 10 times what I could get for selling it all in bulk.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So you're aware of that kind of dynamic.
Oh, yeah. We have a whole team. Our notions team takes all those little baubles and bibs and bobs and buttons and does the same thing, packages them nicely in little baggies and
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
sorts them out and makes them look nice. I mean, we do try our best with the limited bandwidth we have to merchandise things nicely and present things well so that they're appealing.
That
In
word
many cases,
notions is another one, isn't it? Notions. I mean, that comes out of that's been around for a long time as opposed to rehoming. Anyway,
notion is the term. It's
do you have anything to say about notions and why it's called notions? What does that mean? You know, notions
That I don't know.
implies you're walking around and I have a notion to do this and a notion to do that.
I don't know the origin of that word.
Yeah, interesting.
Should I Google it real quick?
You can Google it. Yeah, I love the etymology of words. It's fascinating.
Tina,
Yep.
you mentioned taking in porcelain. Do you get a lot of other kinds of ceramics in?
No, we try not to.
No tiles?
We get the tiles, yeah. They come from the design center. I don't think individuals bring in tile very much.
So if I wanted to
No,
make,
it's just,
if I
yeah.
wanted to make a mosaic, could I buy a big bag of broken tiles from you?
You can buy a big bag of non-broken tiles.
Okay, I could break them
But
myself.
what we have, and they are lovely at times, and I want to take them home. And then I'm telling myself, Tina, don't take them home because you don't do mosaics. We get those little ones, those little square ones that people use for backsplashes in all yummy colors of blues and greens and silver and gold. So they're absolutely stunning at times. You can, Kathy, do you use them for your jewelry?
Yeah, the necklace I'm wearing actually is made of tiny little FabMo tiles
Wow.
and reclaimed metal.
Wow, that's great. That's
These
great.
are little FabMo tiles too on my ears.
You could be a jewelry designer of FabMo products.
Well, I do have a side business making jewelry, and I've sold it at the FabMo event as well as some other local Bay Area events. That's my little side gig.
Yeah, she has awesome things.
Dan, you have people who have side gigs that come in to see you, don't you?
Oh my gosh, yes, constantly. I mean, you know, the DIY people, the do it yourself, do it, whatever, you know, you have all kinds of people that specialize in repairing.
Mhm.
Guys that repair lawnmowers, for example. There's just, you know what they're after when they come in. They come in pretty often. And they're just looking for more things to play with and repair or do whatever, make into art.
Yeah, I
Well,
wanted
you
to-
get a lot of large scale artists coming there.
Yeah, lots of.
Sculptures made out of old tools and stuff. They're
Yeah,
so
there's a
cool.
sculptor, a Bay Area sculptor named Nemo Gould. Do you know the name, Dan?
No, I don't actually.
He does a lot of things with found objects and a lot of like big metal pieces, you know, machinery and tools and some robotic stuff. And I bet you he's been to your place. You probably just haven't met him.
You know, I might have forgotten him too. I mean, I've known so many thousand people
Yeah.
from my days. I'm not there anymore. I'm 84. So, you know, I'm still running the business actually, but we're trying to sell it to our employees.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
that's
And
great.
I just wanted to share with everybody that notions. My wife is Balinese Hindu, and notions are personal articles like for clothing and sewing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
So
was
it's
just looking here at the entomology a little bit, but yeah.
buttons, all
Uh-huh.
kinds of things. They have
Yeah,
beautiful
buttons
notions in
and-
Bali.
What's behind you there on your wall? Well, what are all those little round things behind you on your wall?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm a hockey fan. I'm originally from Canada, so I have pucks signed by all the greats dating
Oh,
back to
wow.
So those are
1950s.
hockey pucks. Oh
Yeah.
my.
Gordie Howe, Sillaps, Bobby Hull. I've got all the
Wow,
greats.
you have quite a collection.
I know. Some people say it's over the top, but it's my boyhood. That was my passion when I was a boy.
Well, if that's your passion,
Yeah.
I mean, if people were to see my garage, they would think I'm a little crazy about fabric.
I thought you meant the little round things behind me, which are sewing bobbins and threads.
Oh,
And notions.
I've got to
Yeah,
tell you,
notions.
Kathy, my mother was, when I was young, she was sewing. She had Singer machines and a room full of all of these materials. People would come over and she'd make dresses. She'd have people lined up to be measured and she'd be making dresses. So
Wow.
I
Wow.
totally identify with the space
Okay.
in right behind you.
Yeah, that's one more thing we do accept is sewing machines and other, looms for weaving and stuff like that. We get those occasionally.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah,
have a couple of really beautiful old sewing machines, and sometimes it's really hard to get rid of them because nobody uses them anymore. They're just pretty. But we do get a good number of just people upgrade, or somebody goes into a retirement home, or somebody passes on and we inherit.
you ever get mangles?
Mangles?
Yeah, it's a thing that you use for ironing clothing.
Oh, that's the
And
German.
they can be works of art. I remember having a few of them come through Urban Ore, and you know, they just have this look to them that is really quite amazing.
Where do you like?
A mangle is something you sit at, and it's a steam thing, I think. I remember right, with electricity, and you press with your feet or something, and it comes down and rolls, and puts steam into fabrics.
It's interesting because the German term Mangel means just that as well. So
Oh, that's where it came from.
but like some big instrument to to steam and press and flatten.
Yeah, that's what they
Music.
do. They sit by themselves. They'll sit on the floor and just be a mangle until you come and use them.
No, we haven't gotten one, but what we recently got, which we haven't quite figured out what to do with, is what appears to be a 1930s, is it Serbian or Albanian or wedding dress. It's very, very fancy and not like a American or Western wedding dress, but these things just show up one day and you go, okay, now what are we going to do with that?
Yep.
Haven't seen that yet, Tina.
Oh, you haven't? Now you have to have
Okay.
another show. Yeah, it's I'm thinking it has to go to some antique roadshow or something.
Sounds like a museum to me. Sounds like the beginnings of a FabMo museum.
The FabMo Museum.
That's when we get our next location and we have a little more space. We can have the museum side too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
We're already thinking about the next space.
Yeah.
Well, we
Always.
have to. I mean, actually, our lease is up in a year and we will probably be able to renew because they like us. We're wonderful tenants. But, you know, we have to be thinking ahead and it would be nice to have more space. It would be nice to have a space that was subsidized, you know, or even lent to us for a while. There's a lot of empty space right now. So we always have our feelers out.
Yeah,
I
we'd
guess you
like to do more.
You could tap into those tech companies that are laying people off that have.
Yes, I mean, we're going to be reaching out to the mayor of Mountain View next. We already had a little chat with Larry Klein, the mayor of Sunnyvale, and, you know, just see if they know about anything and they can hook us up with any place.
You're kind of in the high rent district.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the part of Sunnyvale we're in is not as expensive as if we were on Murphy Avenue, but yeah, it costs
Yeah,
money.
but we would have to go quite far to be out of the high rent area.
Yeah.
And
And then
the-
we'll
the
lose all our
problem-
volunteers.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, that's the problem. Every time we move, we lose volunteers, and then it takes us a while to recruit new ones that are closer by. And last time we moved just literally a few weeks before COVID shut us down. So we had moved, we lost the volunteers, and then everything was delayed due to COVID. So we're still catching up, but I think we're getting there.
You're meeting the challenges as they come.
Yes. What else can we do?
What else can- Well, I need to adjourn, but this has been really, really interesting. And I thank you both, Kathy and Tina, for giving up your dinner time to share your experience and your story about FabMo. It's FabMo-ish. So
Fabulous.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been fun. We've learned
It was a
something as
pleasure.
well.
second
Yeah,
Tuesday,
it was great meeting you all. And
we try to
yeah.
find something interesting. And so I hope we'll see you all next month
okay.
And maybe
next
we'll
time
see you
visit
in
us.
Sunnyvale.
for the quilt.
Yes, please come by.
We'll do. Thanks very much.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
Nice
Thank
meeting you
you.
all and have a good evening. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.